Hello, today I'm going to talk about why populism is wrong and even talk about the supposed leader of the patriotic socialist movement in the United States. So to start off, I'll explain what populism is, its history. Populism came about as an ideology during the 1800s. Some of it was really popular around the time of the Civil War and leading up to the Civil War and a little bit afterwards. It's an ideology where basically they believe that all the individuals of society should, should just directly vote on all matters, you know, and that's how it was presented in leading up to the Civil War in the United States when they had the two new states out west, and they were trying to decide if they were going to be slave states or free states. And so I forgot which one, but one of the states, there was a lot of populist people who believed in the ideology of populism there, and so they voted to let all the citizens vote. Of course, the people who are going to be slaves aren't going to vote. Only the white men are going to get to vote. But regardless, they call this populism. They say it's the truest democracy. But at the time that this ideology was being propagated, it's an already rigged ideology because the only people who are really voting are these upper class white men. And so that's why it was really a bourgeois ideology, a ruling class ideology, trying to mimic, being an ideology for the average person or the working class, the masses. Um, so yeah, it was in the 1800s. There were a lot of ideologies being made as were more fully transitioning from feudalism, where there was still feudalism in a lot of places, and the laissez-faire capitalism was evolving, and a lot of people were theorizing what was the next step for society. And so, Marx and Engels developed Marxism in the 1800s, the mid to late 1800s, and populism was around this time too. I watched another communist on YouTube. I forgot his channel, but he was talking about Caleb Maupin and his interview where Caleb Maupin says himself, "Oh, I I found out after going to Marxist-Leninist meetings that I wasn't a Marxist. I was a populist." And this is so stereotypical for someone like Caleb Maupin to say this, because Caleb Maupin is an upper middle class, really white guy, like ginger white. No offense to ginger people. I'm just saying, like, you're representing the same people who advocated this movement in the 1800s, the upper class and upper middle class white people, um, who had certain privileges and didn't want to change society. They didn't want to change society, and that's what I'm going to get into of how populism fundamentally conflicts with Marxism Leninism here, because Marxism uh, Marxism Leninism specifically talks about the vanguard party. This is supposed to be a party of socialist intellectuals, a minority of socialist intellectuals, and a majority of people in the working class. But these intellectuals are people who are committed to bringing about communism, who they're not just intellectuals, they're not just a broad scope of people named intellectuals. They are specifically people who are committed to intellectually figuring out how to make socialism, how to construct socialism, and how to lead that socialist nation after it's been constructed to communism, which is a truly equal society with no oppression, no social classes, social and economic freedom for everybody. So populism would So basically, the key difference here is that populism is saying we can have a society that already exists, and we can just have all the eligible voters of the society vote directly on this matter, and then this will be the most fair. And in the 1800s, this was way more not fair than it would be today because, only upper class white men were allowed to vote back then. But now it would still be unjust for several reasons. First of all, there's a lot of laws and a lot of Republican states, conservative states, and even probably some liberal states too, which make it harder for minorities and poor people to vote. Marginalized people to vote, and the native indigenous people in these native nations, they don't really have that much say in our voting process either. Regardless, I could go all into how our current democracy is only for the rich, but I'm saying if we supposedly have this system where every eligible voter was allowed to vote, it still wouldn't actually be fair because the way our current system is set up, it is not catering to the masses. It's already corrupt, and that's the main point of Marxism Leninism is that we have to completely reconstruct society, that we have to make a vanguard party. We have to have a party where there's committed communist intellectuals who are committed to socialism and committed to solving the problems of oppression and finding out the needs of the people and helping organize the things that need to be put into place so these needs are 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 um are provided for. And then for further than that, as the socialist construction develops, to make plans, the intellectuals make plans about what is the best infrastructure. In the United States, we're so far behind in infrastructure from all of the other developed countries of the world. Most other developed countries have a high-speed rail system. We don't have that. Our trains, planes, and all everything except for our cars, which are very pricey luxury items, you know, are way behind. And this is because the regular working class people who this would affect, the everyday people, are not don't have any say in our current democracy, which is only a capitalist democracy. So one thing I wrote in my notes here is the concept of cultural hegemony. Famous Italian communist Antonio Gramsci in the early 1900s, he wrote a lot about the cultural hegemony, which means that there's always a ruling class in society. That's a basic principle of Marxism, that there's always a ruling class in society. But Antonio Gramsci talks about very in depth how this ruling class sets the culture for the whole nation. Everybody who's part of this socio-economic system, which is the state or the country, is directly influenced by the culture that this ruling class has constructed. And this is their culture. This is not the culture of the regular people. This is an indoctrinated, enforced culture upon the people. So that's why you have a lot of people voting for the Democrats or Republicans or identifying with liberalism or conservatism, because most of the time they did not come to these beliefs by their own. They just are presented these two viewpoints by this ruling class and saying these are the two viewpoints. Which one are you? And so by the cultural hegemony, the regular working people who don't have time to sit there and reason out, you know, figure out all the facts and spend years of research figuring it all out, and coming to and deciphering all the misinformation to come to the truth of the matter. You know, a lot of people are more concerned with their day-to-day lives, not concerned with this truth. So they just accept this culture and these ideas, this ideology, these beliefs, these customs that the ruling class puts down on them. And in the United States, we have a white patriarchal ruling class, and especially in the East Coast and what would you call the Bible Belt, a lot of this is a Christian nationalism. And Caleb Maupin, this supposed leader of the patriotic socialist movement, uh, talks a lot about how he's a patriot. He loves the United States, and it's a great nation with a lot of history of fighting oppression. But the United States of America itself is the oppression. So you can't identify with the institution that is creating the oppression and saying this is a, is a history of fighting oppression. No, this is the oppression. The people who have been subjected to this socioeconomic system that was made by the ruling class here, those cannot be directly said to be, oh, those are Americans. These are just people. These are working class people. As Karl Marx said, the working class of the world have no country. These ideas, these customs, these traditions are passed down to them, and most of them uh, do not um, do not have the time and energy to devote themselves to figuring out the real truth. And so that's what's important about a Marxist Leninist party is there has to be people who are dedicated to actually finding this truth out, finding the correct scientific method to to make change. And there's many stages of this, as I've talked about in this video. The stage we're in right now is organizing and creating a true vanguard party in the United States, a party that actually represents the people and it is accepted by the masses as the vanguard party for the working class of the United States. Um, what else did I write here? So one thing I wrote in my notes was votes for oppression would not be allowed in a Marxist Leninist system. In populism, votes for anything would be allowed. Because it's not about what is right and what this institution is founded upon. The principles is founded upon which a socialist nation would be founded upon the principles of Marxism, Leninism, and ending oppression. So anyone that is part of that system, an intellectual or worker that's in the party, has to be aligned to those principles, or they will be kicked out of the party. So populism would not be this, and so I want to make sure I say it as straightforward as possible. Populism would not be good because you're taking an already indoctrinated mass and asking them what and giving them usually what would not be a true choice, but you're giving them choices. Most of these choices would probably be, as we see they already are, manufactured, this or this, and they're both bad. So if you tell a group of people who don't know any better, who are already indoctrinated as this system, do you want this? The majority of people, the majority demographic of the people of the United States as of now is white. So voting against things that are gonna, end this white patriarchal dominance over the culture are, there's a lot of white people, especially the Christian nationalists, who, in response to this, become reactionary, actually fight against giving rights and freedoms and protections to people who need it, marginalized people. And so, if you ask an already indoctrinated mass, what do you want to do? There's a lot of people who are just thinking day to day, who are just saying, especially if they're white and their life isn't too inconvenienced, and they're not understanding their class position. They're identifying with the culture of their oppressors, the people who are oppressing them, but are oppressing the marginalized groups even more than them. So they feel like they have a little bit of advantage, like their life isn't as bad as theirs. So like, oh well, I would vote to keep it the same. That would be the view of a lot of these reactionary white people. So that's the point with populism. This is clinging to the old authority and the already in place customs. Marxism, Leninism, we have to actually lead the people to what we know is the best way to end oppression. This is a clear, concise goal and principle that we follow as Marxists Leninists. We do not just leave things up to an already indoctrinated mass. We have to educate people and show them, give them uh, try to give them class consciousness, not just regular everyday class consciousness, but to develop their class consciousness and their understanding of not only that the oppression they're facing is wrong, there's wage slavery and all this is wrong, but that there's actually a way to solve it by taking power of the state and constructing socialism, which in a lot of the propaganda that the ruling class of the United States manufactures, they want people to feel hopeless, like there's no hope of changing the system or making it better. So this makes the reactionary white people, even working class white people in the conservative areas, reactionary because they're afraid that their little comfort that they have of not being part of that marginalized group will be taken away, and then they'll just have it as bad as everybody else. That's where reactionism comes in. So I also wrote um, a socialist government would not be for the the wants of individual people. It's not to guarantee that anybody can do what they want. As this capitalist freedom seems to be, it's for the needs of the collective society itself. So a socialist government would be to understand the people and do what is best for this collective mass of people, not as we see in this democracy for the rich we have now, where we have this whole culture of suing people because, oh, it's my right to do this, oh, I got the intellectual rights on this, and I own this. No, it's for what's best for the people, not for individuals who usually only have that power because they've inherited it. But yeah, I could go on and on. But so, um, last thing what I wrote here was people who are communist, who are in a communist party, need to be dedicated civil servants who are truly committed to ending oppression, and that's a principle that makes makes this party leading the masses, because this is the only way to guarantee the only the only way to guarantee true freedom to these masses of people. And this is why there's been so many purges from different communist parties throughout history, like in the last 100 years. And there's been a huge misconception that every time there's a purge in a communist party, that all these people who are purged are murdered or something. And you could go into a lot of this here, but there were times, especially under the Soviet Union, when senior officials, not Stalin or any of the high up members of the party, but people who are just above the people who are getting purged, would take it upon themselves to execute them, especially in times of war and during World War II, and leading up to World War II, because there was a huge paranoia in this nation, that the first socialist nation, trying to keep people who are trying to disrupt it out of the party. And so this wasn't really always a direct order, but this did happen in history, and we need to recognize that. And China has moved